No, not yet. Hello and welcome to the International Soccer Podcast by Canada Soccer Files. I'm Kevin.
And I'm Kiara. Today we are doing Group B of African Cup 2023 qualifying, which is already underway.
Yeah, and I'm happy to have you with me here, Kiara. And we did actually do a series on teams of the African Cup 2021 earlier this year. It actually took place in January 2022. So we'll be changing our format a little bit as a result. Rather than repeating what we podcasted there, we'll be providing a link in the show notes or in the show description, as well as the time at which each team is discussed in that podcast. So interested listeners can go to soccerfiles.captivate.fm or just look us up on Soccer Files Canada, and we'll repeat the address slowly at the end there. And you can click on the links in the show notes to bring up that podcast if you want a little more details about the teams. So, yeah.
Yeah, that information will be a more detailed World Cup overview and a detailed look at the finals of the African Cup tournaments, which we'll only cover briefly here. This time, we'll be focusing on African Cup qualifying campaigns and recent history. For teams that were not covered in the earlier set of podcasts, we'll give a more complete history here.
Right. So let's look at the three sections of the podcast that we'll cover. So the first section is kind of you tell us about part one.
Sure. Yeah, part one. We're going to look at who is in the group, which pot they come from, and some geographical information about each country.
Right. Okay. And then part two is a team-by-team overview with a quick review of their participation and major achievements, an overview of their African Cup history, and a deep dive into their African Cup qualifying history. And then we'll do a summary and try to give a sense of their recent form. Added to that, we're going to have a brief look at players, especially the ones that have been scoring for them.
Yeah. And then in part three, we'll end with a comparison of the teams through their head-to-head meetings and their FIFA and ELO rankings. And this will launch us into a discussion of their prospects and predictions. And thrillingly, we can check how accurate we are by checking the first two sets of the 6-set qualification, which took place in June. One of us hasn't looked at the results, and so specific predictions can be made and then checked.
Right. And you know the results, Kiara, but I don't. Great. And then again, at the end, we'll provide the links for those who want to delve into more history on the teams that we've covered earlier. So I'm wearing a Cardiff shirt, kind of betraying my lack of African shirts, but I hope to add African shirts to my collection. But I figured Cape Verde is blue, so I went with the blue.
Nice connection.
All right, well, let's take a look at the teams coming in, introduce the teams and what pot they come from. Oh, do you want to do that?
Go for it.
Okay. No, that's me. Okay, so Burkina Faso is the first team. They came out of pot 1, and Cape Verde came out of pot 2. It's Togo from pot 3, and Eswatini, who won their preliminary round qualification, came out of pot 4. And your part is giving us a little geographical information on each country, right?
Yes, I'll do that. So,
okay.
We'll start with Burkina Faso. So it's a country in West Africa, known as Upper Volta before 1984. In terms of size, it's about 274,000 kilometers. So it's the 29th out of 54 in Africa. So it's similar in size to New Zealand. And it has a population of about 21 million as of 2020. So the 19th largest in Africa.
Great. All right. Let's move on to Cape Verde.
Mm-hmm. So Cape Verde is a group of islands off the west coast of Africa. In terms of land size, it's only about 4,000 kilometers, so 173rd in the world and 50th out of 54 in Africa. So quite small, falling between Trinidad and Luxembourg in terms of size and world rankings. In terms of population, it's got 560,000 people, so the second smallest in Africa, and 29th smallest in the world.
Yeah, and they're heavily influenced by Portugal, a lot of their players. play in Portugal, actually. How about Togo?
So Togo was kind of a thin sliver of a country, also in the west of Africa. In terms of land size, it's about 56,000 square kilometers, and that's 41st in Africa. So one of the smaller countries there as well. And it has a population of 7.9 million as of 2021, so 34th out of 58.
All right, cool. And the last one is Eswatini.
Yeah, so Eswatini was formerly known as Swaziland until 2018 when it had that name change. And this is a tiny country in the southeast of Africa, kind of surrounded by South Africa. It's 17,000 square kilometers, so 48th out of 54 in Africa. So lots of small countries in this group. And then population is about 1.16 million as of 2020, so 49th smallest in terms of population in Africa.
Cool. Now, you took a trip to Africa before COVID hit.
I did.
What countries did you hit?
Pardon?
What countries did you visit?
I was in Zimbabwe, Botswana, and Namibia and South Africa. So I didn't hit any of the ones here, but I'd love to go back and check out some of these ones.
Oh, cool. That sounds like a great trip. Mm-hmm. Okay, well, let's look at them in terms of comparison. So any observations there?
Like I said, just a lot of small countries in this group and smaller populations. In terms of size and number of people.
Sorry, I think I put you on the spot a bit there. But Burkina Faso, as far as this goes, quite a bit the biggest country. Yeah. And Cape Verde and Eswatini seem to be two of the very smallest countries in Africa. It seems like Cape Verde coming from pot 2 kind of punches above their weight, hey?
Yeah, I think so.
Right. All right, well, let's move on to the team by team discussion, and we'll start with Burkina Faso, who we did do in January of 2021, so you can go back and get more details on them if you want. But let's start with a nickname.
Yeah, Burkina Faso are known as Les Étalons, or the Stallions. And I'll pass it over to you to talk about their history.
Okay, well, we'll begin with their participation and achievements. So they began qualifying, as Chiara said, as Upper Volta for the African Cups before 1984. That was in 1968 was their first World Cup qualification. And I think it was 78 for the African Cup. No, 1968 for the African Cup and 1978 for the World Cup. So participation, though, is inconsistent in both cups until the mid-90s. They entered only 2 of the 5 World Cups before 1998 and 6 of the 14 African Cups. From 1996, though, they've been participating consistently in both. How have they done in terms of achievement, Chiara?
Well, despite being part of qualifying, they have never reached the World Cup. And they qualified for only 1 of those 6 African Cup entries before 1996, that being in 1978. But they have qualified quite consistently since, missing only 3 of the 13 versions from 1996 to 2019. Their best result was 2nd place in 2013. But more significant is top 4 finishes in 3 of the last 5 editions.
Wow.
And that's a result they had only otherwise achieved when they hosted in 1998.
All right. So they're in good form recently, in African Cup at least.
Yeah.
Now, we are going to skip their kind of World Cup overview. You can go back to the previous podcast if you want to listen to that. And we're just going to look at their recent campaigns in World Cup qualifying. Or the most recent campaign, their 2022 campaign. Do you want to take us through that, Chiara?
Yeah. So in the 2022 World Cup qualifying, they received a bye in round 1 of 3, which is a preliminary round. So they were one of about 30 teams that got a bye, as only the bottom 28 ranked teams are required to play that first round.
Right.
When they were playing their games, they tied favorites Algeria twice, but proved a little less consistent against the weaker teams. So they had a draw at home to Niger, and they finished 2nd in that round, in round 2 of 3.
Yeah, second place finish, a bit disappointing, but Algeria had won the 2019 African Cup, so they were obviously the pot one team there. I mean, they went undefeated, but maybe 2 draws at home, or too many draws kind of got them in the end, hey?
Yeah.
All right, well, let's move on to African Cup, which is our main focus here. And again, we're going to skip the kind of the long history or the overview, because that can be found in the previous podcast we did on them. And we're going to focus on African Cup qualifying in detail. That's our deep dive here. So they first entered qualification in 1968, but they withdrew from the following 2 editions. 1978 was their first qualification for the Cup. I mean, their first qualification campaign. But that was only the result of Ivory Coast being disqualified. That was a successful qualification, and they made it because Ivory Coast was disqualified. It was only in 1982 that they earned their first point, a home tie with Algeria, having lost to them 0-7 in Algeria. So kind of a Pyrrhic victory there. And by the end of the 80s, they had participated in 5 cups, but withdrawn or not participated in 7. So 1990 marked a shift in 2 ways. Their participation became more consistent, a withdrawal in 1994 being their only failure to complete qualification, but also a shift in terms of improved performance. So 1990 gave them their first win, and in 1992 they were competitive in a group with Ghana and Nigeria, going undefeated at home. 1996 began a string of regular successful qualifications for the Cup. There they won a competitive group over Ivory Coast and Morocco, and in 1998 they qualified by dint of hosting. Ironically, their first good performance in the Cup since 1998 came after one of their weakest qualifications. They traded home wins with Central African Republic, that's one of the weakest teams in Africa, in the final round of qualification, having received byes up to that point, and they got through only on goal difference. In that 1998 Cup, though, they reached the final for their best result ever. Strong qualifying performances continued, and they haven't lost at home since 2010. 2017 saw another top 4 finish, which made what happened in 2019 a shock. And we're going to look at that shock now. We'll cover the last 2 African Cups in detail. Do you want to talk about 2019?
Yeah, so...
What was the shock?
Well, it was a ghastly result. They failed to qualify for the expanded tournament from a weak group that they seemed sure to win. The performance was not that bad, winning all the games at home, but a weak road record earned them only a draw against Botswana to give that team their only point, and was less consistent than Angola and Mauritania, who finished ahead, leading them 3rd in the qualifying group.
Wow, yeah, they finished behind Angola and Mauritania, and were out of the Cup. I think they were the only kind of big name that didn't make it to the expanded Cup. Mm-hmm. All right, well, let's see if they did any better in 2021.
So 2021, they started qualifying with a home draw with 3rd place Uganda and tied them again away, but were consistent, if not, really convincing otherwise. They went undefeated, and tying in Malawi, who advanced with them, and beating South Sudan twice to finish 1st in their qualifying group.
Right. Obviously, the better road record there made the difference.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, let's move on to the group stage then.
So, in the tournament, they lost to host Cameroon, but beat Cape Verde and tied Ethiopia to place 2nd in the group stage. And then from there, they beat Gabon in an 18 penalty shootout and also beat Tunisia. So this took them to the semifinal, where they lost to eventual champion Senegal, and also lost to host Cameroon, facing them a second time. where they went up 3 goals by the 47th minute, but eventually lost in a penalty shootout to finish 4th in the tournament.
Wow, that's incredible. Yeah, that game with Gabon you mentioned, they went to 18 penalties. There's another big number in that game, 15 yellow cards.
Wow. That's shocking.
Yeah. And I think there was, Gabon was a man down, but they scored an extra time goal at 90+1 to push the game to extra time. So a really exciting game. There. And we look at some of the players. I remember some of the players from having watched that African Cup. But are there any kind of patterns you notice in the players there, Kiera?
I think it seems like Aristide Bance and Bertrand Traoré seem to be their main scorers. But I don't see them necessarily scoring in later competitions.
Actually, it's. I wasn't expecting them to do as well as they did because they were losing a few of their big names. So Aristide Bance is a really interesting character, kind of a clumsy player who gets things done. And Jonathan Petropia, especially losing those players, made me worry about how well they were going to do in the cup. But they do have Bertrand Traoré, who plays in England. I don't think he scored in the African Cup, but he was very influential. But one of the players that stood out was Dango Ouattara. He actually got a red card for their last game, I think it was. I'll just check here. Yeah, so he wasn't available for the game against Senegal, which was really too bad in the semi-finals. But he was kind of an outstanding player, even though he scored just 1 goal. And I can't help but mention the nominative determinism of Stopira. He's actually on the scoreboard a couple of times here, but as his name suggests, he is a defender, which is kind of funny. But they really do have a lot of good players, and they look pretty good going forward because a lot of those players are kind of young. Another guy who made an impression in the African Cup was Edmund Tapsoba. So pretty strong in defense there. Shall we move on?
I think so.
Okay. Let's go to a summary and of their performance, and then you're going to take us through kind of their recent form. So they were really weak before 1996 was Burkina Faso, and they entered less than half of the tournaments. Some improvement was evident from 1992, but they were a wildly inconsistent team. In 1998, they came 4th in the African Cup, hosting admittedly helping there, but they lost all games in their World Cup qualifying group. Another example is their general dissimilarity between African Cup and World Cup qualifying. They're a lot weaker in World Cup qualifying, although not so much recently. And finally, though qualifying campaigns were strong from 1992, they were pretty weak in cups. Recently, that's become either weak or else finishing in the top 4 of tournaments. So they range from one to the other, but less and less as time goes on.
Yeah, they are becoming definitely more consistent in recent times. And their World Cup campaigns are starting to match their African Cup qualifications. So they are due to reach a World Cup, having come close in 3 campaigns from 2010 to 2018. But their failure to qualify for the 2019 African Cup, an expanded edition no less, is a flashback to that inconsistency you talked about. But finishing Final 4 in 3 of the last 5 African Cups is putting them among the top teams in Africa.
Yeah, they're one of the teams I really like. All right, well, that brings us to the end of Burkina Faso, and we will move on to Cape Verde. So starting with their participation and achievements, they're a relatively new team, first entering World Cup qualification in 2002, and but they participated consistently since. Their first entry in the African Cup was in 1994, but they missed the next two after that and only became consistent in participation from 2000 onward. And they participated consistently, so basically in both cups since 2000. How about their achievements, Kiera?
Well, they've never reached the World Cup. And their first successful African Cup qualification was in 2013. And they did very well, actually reaching the quarterfinals.
That's right. And they reached the cup after that too in 2015, getting knocked out in the first round there. But we'll take a closer look at that and how they've done more recently. But let's take a look at how they did in the recent World Cup qualifying campaign.
Mm-hmm. So in the 2022 qualifying, they also received a bye in that first preliminary round, being not one of the bottom 28 ranked teams. And then they did excellently on the road, going undefeated, tying Nigeria and Central African Republic and beating Liberia. Their only loss was at home to Nigeria, but they won the other for a commanding second place finish behind Nigeria in round 2 of 3.
Pretty good. Yeah, I just want to comment on their games against Liberia. So they scored the winning goal in that away leg in injury time at 90+2. And then at home, the single goal that they won on came at 90. So poor Liberia there, suffering 2 late goals. All right, let's move on. Again, we're going to skip the African Cup overview for Cape Verde. You can refer to the previous podcast for that. And we're going to go right to their African Cup qualifying in detail. So in early African Cups, they were knocked out at the preliminary stage until 2004 by Guinea-Bissau in 1994, Mali in 2000, and Liberia in 2002. There were no preliminary rounds from 2004, and they were competitive with Kenya and Togo despite a third place finish that year. They were undefeated at home in 2008, but they finished bottom of the group, tying twice at home and losing all on the road. After that, they finished near the bottom of the qualifying group. 2012 saw an improvement where they fell just short of the cup, winning all home games and tying with Mali on top of losing and tying with Mali, who finished on top, but they lost out on their head-to-head goal difference. This foreshadowed them reaching the cup in 2013, and they reached the next cup in 2015 again, winning all home games there. But after 2 qualifications in a row, they failed in 2017. They were one of the few second place finishers not to advance. And the cause of that was a home loss to Libya on a goal at 90 in the final game. So just missed out there. Let's see how they've done since the cup expanded to 24 teams in 2019.
Despite this expanded, it was a terrible result for them. They finished last in their qualifying group that they seemed sure to advance from. Their only win was at home to Tanzania, though they lost away to them in the next game. They tied the ostensibly weak Lesotho twice, but finished behind them, having lost both games to group winners Uganda.
Yeah, that's pretty bad. Tanzania and Lesotho are pretty weak teams, and they must have been disappointed with that.
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's see if they recovered in 2021.
Better. They went undefeated in qualification and even bested Cameroon, but it was only good enough for a second place finish in the qualifying group. Cameroon was the only team they beat at home, tying last place Mozambique there and third place Rwanda, home and away.
Interesting. Sorry. Yeah, it just seemed like too many ties was the reason they finished second rather than first.
Yeah, it seems to be. They did beat Ethiopia in the tournament opener, then lost to Burkina Faso and tied host Cameroon to finish third in the group stage, which was enough for an advancing spot. But they then lost to the eventual champion Senegal in the round of 16.
Right, yeah. So Ethiopia was a bit unfortunate there. They took a red card just 12 minutes in, and already being kind of a weak team, they didn't have much of a chance after that. And we see actually that they were tied for second place with Burkina Faso. The reason they finished third was in their head-to-head game, Burkina Faso did better. Burkina Faso won. And just a comment on that round of 16 game with Senegal. There was really poor refereeing in that game with a questionable red card to Cape Verde just 21 minutes in. And then another outrageous one following a terrible clash of heads at 57 minutes of the game. So Senegal, who despite winning the tournament were pretty poor in this game, scored 2 goals against the 9-man Cape Verde. They got those goals at 63 and finally got a second goal at 90+2 in injury time. So a bit unfortunate there for Cape Verde in the cup.
Mm-hmm.
All right, well, let's take a look at their players. And I'm just going to reduce the graphic size for our YouTube listeners. Do you notice any patterns there, Kiera?
For main scorers, we have Gary Mendez Rodriguez and Julio Tavares. Are the two that are standing out to me.
Yeah, and that's pretty much it. Their forward line. Earlier we see Ryan Mendez's name, but he kind of was their top forward for a while. But he's 32 years old now, so maybe kind of aging out. And in fact, all of them are in their 30s, so it looks like they're going to have to find some new talent here. And I think I made a mistake last time. I was talking about Stopira as a Burkina Faso player, but he's actually a Cape Verde player. So transfer all of those comments down to here. Let's move on to a summary and an overview of their recent performance. So in summary, their history is short, but one of steady improvement to at least 2013. Their improving record has been partially due to a really strong home form, which a lot of African teams have, where they can even regularly trouble big teams. Still, their 2 cups in a row was something of an overachievement, as 2017 and 2019, where they failed to qualify, showed. But with the cup expanding to 24 teams, they do kind of come into the range of qualifying more regularly as they did in 2021.
Yeah, passing that group stage in 2013 and 2021 was an overachievement. Doing so as a third place finish in 2021 was evidence of that. But reaching the expanded African Cup is well within their means, and failing to do so in 2019 was a disappointment. Good campaigns in 2021 and in 2022 World Cup qualifying show them to be in a good period.
That's right. Okay, well, that ends our look at Cape Verde, and we move on to Togo. So do we have a nickname for Togo, Kiera?
We do. They are Les Eperviers, or the Sparrowhawks.
Right. Okay, the Sparrowhawks. Let's take a look at their participation. They first entered World Cup qualification in 1974. And they withdrew from 2 tournaments in a row in 1986 and 1990, but they participated regularly otherwise. They first joined the African Nations Cup in 1968 and participated fairly consistently, withdrawing 3 times in 1974, 1990, and 1994. And they were also disqualified in 2010. Let's take a look at their achievements.
So they reached the World Cup in 2006, which was a surprise since they usually do well to reach the final round. It was the peak strong period, as they did reach the final round 4 times in a row around that time. That period also accounts for 4 of their 8 appearances at the African Cup. However, the only time that they passed the group stage was outside that period in 2013. And a key figure in their success was star Emmanuel Adebayor, whose international career stretched from 2000 to 2019.
Wow. Still, I guess, finished now, but that's a long 20-year history. Okay, in the case of Togo, we are going to overview their World Cup history because they weren't part of the African Cup earlier this year. So let's take a look at their World Cup history. And qualifying for the 2006 World Cup was the achievement, was an amazing achievement, and it hardly matters that they lost all their games once there. Their 1998 and 2002 campaigns, though, had shown growing strength. Apart from a preliminary round win over Senegal in 1978, they counted their success in terms of home game upsets, and they were weak in general, earning no points in their 1994 campaign. 1998 was headed that way, but after losing the first 4 games, they earned points in their last 2, and they finished tied on points with Zimbabwe, though still in last place. But the tail end of that 1998 campaign bled into 2002, which was much better. They finished at the bottom of a tight middle pack. Those improvements in no way predicted 2006, though, which was a much bigger achievement. They lost only the first of the 10 games in that qualification run, and they finished ahead of Senegal and Zambia. Since then, they've remained strong at home, but they've slid backwards, finishing 3rd in the final round in 2010, and then not even reaching the final round since then. And we'll take a look at their most recent campaign in 2022.
Yeah, so they were among that bottom 28 ranked teams that were required to play that first round, that preliminary knockout round. The FIFA ranking was 128, while Comoros was ranked 146, but they did tie Comoros, who had recently surprised by qualifying for the 2021 African Cup. So they tied in that first leg away and then won at home to advance over them. So they came in as the 4th seed and were the only one to take points from group winner Senegal, tying them at home. Overall, though, they did not do well at home, otherwise tying Congo there, but they did well on the road, beating both 2nd seed Congo and Namibia. Though far behind Senegal, they did finish 2nd in round 2 of 3.
Yeah, that's a good result. The fact that they're in a preliminary round and coming in as the 4th seed kind of shows how far they've fallen from 2006. But this also shows that they still have a bit of steam in them and they can surprise, even on the road this time, which really is a surprise. Okay, well, we are focusing a bit more on African Cup here. So let's take first a quick overview of their African Cup history and then a deep dive into their qualifying.
Yeah, so for the overview, they have qualified 8 times for the African Cup. 2 of these were in 1972 and 1984. And then in a good period, 4 out of the 5 were from 1998 to 2006. They were disqualified, however, in 2010 after having qualified. They reached it again in 2013 and 2017. And then in 2006, which was the year they reached the World Cup, was the only time they ever lost all 3 games. And then 2013 was the only time that they've passed the group stage.
All right. Let's take a look at their qualifying. Their long history begins in 1968, and they've been fairly consistent, as we said, in participation, withdrawing from only 3 of the 25 editions to 2021 and being disqualified in 2010, although they did reach the Cup that year. Apart from a group stage in 1968, qualification consisted of single pairings that went up until 1992, those knockout stages, and they usually tied or even won at home, going beyond the first round about half the time until 1988, and even reaching the Cup in 1972, where they beat out Dahomey, which is now called Benin, and Ghana, and in 84, where they won 3 rounds of qualification to reach the cup. 1992, as I said, was the first group stage. They finished second last there, and then they finished last in 1996, withdrawing in 1994. But they rose unexpectedly in 1998 to win their group and reach the cup. 2000 was less convincing, but they reached it again for a third straight time in 2002. And in 2002, they finished first in qualifying over Senegal, the same team that they would win the group over in 2006 to reach the World Cup. But the win in 2002 came as a shock. The win in 2006 of the World Cup group came as a shock. But we can see in this deep dive that it's been foreshadowed both in World Cup and in African Cup qualification. They did fall short of the Cup in 2004, beaten out by Kenya. But it was that 2006 World Cup qualification run that earned them passage into the African Cup that year. But 2006 ended a run of 4 out of 5 Cups in a row and kind of ended their strongest period. They were competitive in 2008, and actually they made the Cup in 2010, but they were disqualified before the Cup began. Their bus was shot up on the way to traveling to Angola. They were traveling through the dangerous Cabinda region. And at first there was a lot of sympathy for them, but later they were kind of blamed for poor decisions. Apparently driving through Cabinda is never a good idea, and they were kind of told not to do that and to take an airplane instead. So it's a bit of a sad story there in 2010. 2012 saw them finish 4th of 5 in a group behind Malawi, but always unpredictable. They reached the Cup in 2013. There they beat Gabon in a quick qualification system, returning to a knockout format. Back to a group format in 2015, though, they finished last that year, but then finished second in 2017 to reach the Cup again. So always up and down. You never know what you're going to get with Togo. Let's see how they've done in the last 2 campaigns.
Yeah, in their 2019 campaign, they did come last in a qualifying group that they came into as the pot 2 team. So disappointing standing there. Yeah. They tied second place Benin at home and bested Gambia, but finished behind them and the group winners Algeria, to whom they lost twice.
Yeah, as I say, it's hard to know what you're going to get with Togo. And we'll see that when we get to the predictions for this Cup. But how about 2021?
2021, they lost all their games at home, but they did tie Kenya, who finished 3rd, and 4th-seeded Comoros, who surprisingly finished 2nd. They also lost both to group winner Egypt, so they did finish last in the qualifying group again.
Yeah, and losing all at home is pretty bad.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we'll just take a quick look at their players here. We can see, or is there anything you noticed there, Kiara?
Truthfully, I don't know many of their players.
Yeah.
Throw it back to you.
We can see Emmanuel Adebayor right at the end of his career there. I think that may have been the last goal he scored, because I don't even think he finished qualification with the team. And they do have a couple of veterans, in Floyd Aiti and a couple of familiar names. But of course, the ones who were most outstanding in 2006 are all probably retired now. So they're kind of rebuilding and not rebuilding that well, it seems. I'm just looking for that Kojo Fodolaba, because that's a familiar name to me. So, but it looks like he may not have played for the team recently, because I can't find him on the roster.
He's in the 2019 African Cup qualifying.
Yeah, I'm looking on the website now, and his name
Oh yeah,
is popping up, which usually indicates that they haven't played in the last year or so.
yeah.
So, um, oh yeah, he's in
Oh,
2022.
in 2022. Yeah, he's there again.
Also scored a goal, and Uloji Plakafes, who scored three of their six goals in 2022 World Cup qualifying. So he may be an up and coming name. Um, he's 27 years old, so not so up and coming as all that. Okay, well, let's finish off with a summary and a view of their recent form. Um, and in summary, looking back, 1998 to 2006 was their peak period of strength, capped by an unlikely appearance at the World Cup. The success, which continued sporadically until 2017, included their only trip past the group stage of the Cup in 2013, and it rested largely on the influence of star Emmanuel Adebayor. Although, in fairness, it did start before his time, that period of strength. There's much drama, sadly, based on their many problems, more in line with a third tier African nation. They've had issues about paying players and managers quitting in frustration. And I mentioned the drama of their bus being shot up on the way to the finals in Angola. And they were actually disqualified from the Cup because of that. And in 2017, another sad story, which saw their goalkeeper having to return home from the Cup after it was shot up. His house was shot up following a poor performance in a game there. So a lot of drama surrounding Togo.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and as we've mentioned, they have suffered that slow but steady decline from their 2006 World Cup glory, um, and their success has been hampered by those many problems. They have had success in spurts through African Cup appearances in 2013 and 2017. So overall, they are unpredictable with some competitive qualifying campaigns interspersed with some weak ones. And that continues to today with those last place finishes in the 2019 and 2021 African Cup qualifying, followed by a second place finish um, in their 2022
Yeah,
World Cup
so
campaign.
always continuing to surprise there. Okay, we'll move on now to the last team, Eswatini. And do we have a nickname for them?
We do. Now, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing this right, but it's Silengu Semnekati, which translates to the King's Shield or the Shield of His Majesty.
Oh, well done there. All right, well, we'll begin with a look at their participation history under the name of Swaziland, which Kiera mentioned earlier on. They first entered World Cup qualifying in 1994, and they've participated consistently. That's not the case in African Cup qualification, which began earlier in 1986, but where they only completed 3 of the 8 editions from 1984 to 1998, withdrawing twice from that period and then a third time in 2013. How have they done in terms of achievement, Kiera?
They haven't qualified for any cup, and they usually lose in the preliminary round. So, not much to talk
Oh,
about in that way so
yeah,
far.
that's too bad. Okay, well, again, these guys were not covered in the 2022 African Cup or the African Cup earlier this year. So let's take a look at their World Cup history. And they've never passed the first round of World Cup qualification. They looked good in 1994 and 2010. In 1994, it was a win over Zaire, which is now Congo, Democratic Republic of Congo. And they got a tie with Cameroon in 1994. And it was similar in 2010 when they beat Togo and tied Zambia. However, road losses prevented their progress every time. Let's see how they did in the recent 2022 campaign.
Yeah, so in that World Cup qualifying, they were among the bottom 28 ranked teams that had to play that first round. that preliminary knockout round because their FIFA ranking was 139. And Djibouti was ranked third from the bottom at 195, and yet they did lose in the first leg in Djibouti and only managed a goalless draw in the home leg, so they were eliminated in the preliminary knockout.
Wow, that is a bad loss. I mean, I think Djibouti are actually getting a little better, but right now they're still considered one of the very weakest teams. So a bit of a shame to lose to Djibouti. Let's move on to the African Cup, and we are going to cover their history here in an overview. Do you want to handle that, Kiara?
Sure. Yeah, they have really only had 2 competitive qualifications in the African Cup. In 2004, where they finished a competitive third, and in 2017, where they finished in second. Though usually competitive at home, it's often in the form of draws, which leads them finishing in the bottom half of the groups or losing 2 teams.
Knockouts, yeah.
Sometimes, though, they're just simply weak, finishing behind Eritrea in 2008, losing all 6 games in 2012, and withdrawing in 2013. Their most competitive campaign came in 2017, and we'll look at that in more detail below.
Right, thanks, Kiara. And we are going to look at their qualifying history in detail. So 1992 was arguably a third competitive campaign. Kiara mentioned the other 2. But in 1992, they beat group winner Zambia, but a draw with Angola left them out of contention to the point where they didn't even bother playing their last game in that group. Prior to that, they had been thrashed by Zimbabwe home and away in their first campaign in 1986, and they got past Tanzania in the first round in 1990, tying twice and advancing on penalties before they were knocked out by Malawi in the following round. The arguably competitive 1992 was not followed up, and they didn't participate in the following 3 editions, but they returned in 2000, only to be quickly knocked out in early rounds by Madagascar and then by Kenya in 2002. In 2004, though, they beat Libya and they tied Congo DR at home, as well as besting Botswana, but it only earned them third place. Only earned them third place in the group, and only the top team advanced. So a bit far from actually reaching it there. The 2006 and 2010 African Cups were actually based on World Cup campaigns that year, World Cup qualifying, and they finished too low in those groups to reach those cups, while 2008 in the middle saw them finish last in a group with a surprisingly strong Eritrea. 2012 marks a low point, losing all games in an admittedly tough group with Ghana, Sudan, and Congo. They withdrew in 2013, and they were knocked out in a preliminary with Sierra Leone before turning in their best result in 2017. So Kiara said that we would look at that in more detail. So this is it. They went undefeated at home and winning in Guinea. Away in Guinea, I mean, they finished second behind Zimbabwe. That probably would have qualified them for the expanded cup in 2019, but it wasn't enough in 2017. But let's see if they could build on that success when the cup was expanded to 24 teams.
So in 2019, this was when they had that name change from Swaziland to Eswatini during this campaign. And in this, they earned only a single point in their opening game away in Niger. So they did finish last in the qualifying group.
That's too bad. I mean, it looked like after the first game they were picking up from 2017, and then losing all games after that. Too bad. How about 2021?
So they went in as not being one of the 8 weakest teams that had to undergo a preliminary round. But they managed only a home draw with third place finishers Congo, until the last game where they earned a draw in Senegal, who had already sealed a first place finish. They did unfortunately lose to both Guinea-Bissau, and they did finish last in the qualifying group. But
yeah, anyway, they can walk away with the feather of tying Senegal, who actually won the cup in the end. So they must have had a little party after that. Now we do have to cover 2023 qualifying, because they actually played in a preliminary round, so they kind of had to earn their way into this group. What happened there?
Yeah, I'm actually going to let you talk about how that went for them.
Oh, okay. Well, it was a preliminary. I think not. I think it was about 10 or 12 teams that had to play in the preliminary round, and they were paired with Somalia. So they won away 3-0. So that was pretty much decided, and they also won at home 2-1. So a pretty convincing qualification over Somalia, and not a given, because they had lost to similarly strength teams like Djibouti and Eritrea. So this was probably a bit of a confidence-inspiring win. Let us take a quick look at players. Actually, I really am not familiar with these players, because they've never been in a tournament. Do you see any patterns there, Kiera?
Yeah, I don't see any repeated names in terms of scorers. But what is standing out to me are 3 red cards.
Oh yes, in what, 2021 qualifying. Yeah, red cards against Senegal, Congo, and Senegal right at the end of that last game with Senegal, where they managed to tie. I'm seeing that most of the players do play locally, but they have a couple of forwards playing in, one forward playing in South Africa and one playing in Angola. So a pretty developing team there, with not a lot of experience outside their country. Let's move on then to a summary and a look at their recent form. So they do show some strength at home, usually in the form of ties. They challenge some of the best there, including Nigeria and Cameroon. It's not consistent, though, and they also lose to lesser teams at home like Niger, Sudan, and Madagascar. They've also been known to steal a tie on the road, usually against weak or middling teams like Malawi or Angola. But we've made a lot of their biggest feather an away draw with Senegal in 2021. They have a single road win, which was over Guinea in 2019, but they've never earned a road point in World Cup qualification until they thrashed Djibouti 6-0 in 2018. Though whatever glory that brought is soured by losing to Djibouti in the same preliminary knockout in 2022.
Yeah, like you said, that competitiveness at home remains a factor. And they were undefeated in their 2004 and 2017 groups, though not always, as they lost all their games in 2012 and 2019. So despite those couple of good road results in 2019 and 2021, especially that tie with Senegal away, they were weak in these campaigns, and there can be no lower low than getting knocked out in the preliminaries by Djibouti in that 2022 World Cup qualifying.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, but that convincing set over Somalia in 2023, that African Cup qualifying is perhaps a bit of lotion on that wound.
Nice. Great. Okay, well, that ends part 2, our look at the individual teams. So now we're going to get into this group and compare them with each other a bit, beginning with their current rankings. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so Burkina Faso is coming from pot 1, and they're ranked 56 in their FIFA rankings and 68th in the ELO rankings.
Right. Okay. And that's a big improvement from around 2007 and 2008, when they were below 100. So they have shown improvement over the last 10 to 15 years. How about Cape Verde?
So Cape Verde is in pot 2, and they're ranked 71st in FIFA rankings and 85th in ELO.
All right, so about the same distance in both rankings behind Burkina Faso. They were also below 100 around the same time in about 2008. So they've improved quite a bit over the years too. Let's move on to pot three, Togo. Where do they stand?
So Togo is 121st in FIFA rankings and 115th with ELO.
All right. And well, we can guess that they were a lot higher around 2006 and in that strong period and have fallen since. And finally, pot four, Eswatini.
Yeah, so they are 146th in both FIFA and ELO rankings.
Oh, okay, in both rankings. Okay, and I'm just going to summarize here for our listeners, especially. We tend to take the ELO rankings a bit more seriously than the FIFA rankings, so I'll give you those in comparison. So Burkina Faso is 68, Cape Verde is 85, Togo is 115, and Eswatini is 146. So and it's the same order in FIFA, so a pretty clear delineation there. We'll move on to talking about the head-to-head record. Do you want to just give us the overview, and then I'll maybe give some details?
Sounds good. So first, Burkina Faso versus Cape Verde. Burkina Faso has the winning record with 3 wins, 0 ties, and 2 losses.
All right, and it's actually a bit more convincing than that. Cape Verde won twice in their 2006 meeting, but they met recently in 2018 and 2021, and Burkina Faso won all three games. So Burkina Faso looking the stronger there.
Yeah, in terms of Burkina Faso and Togo in head-to-head, Burkina Faso is also coming out on top with 2 wins, 0 ties, and 1 loss.
That's right, and they first met in 1992, which was quite a while ago, and exchanged wins at home. But the more significant one is the 2013 meeting in the African Cup quarterfinal, and Burkina Faso won that game 1-0, but it was in extra time, so a pretty tight battle there.
Next comes Burkina Faso and Eswatini, and there's not much to report because they haven't played.
Okay, well, let's move on to the next one then.
Yeah. Cape Verde versus Togo. We have a 1 win, no ties, and 1 loss.
Right. So they exchanged home wins, but that was way back in 2004. So probably not that relevant here. How about the next one?
Cape Verde and Eswatini. We have a 1 win, 1 tie, and 0 losses.
Right. And their meeting was in 2006, where Cape Verde bested Eswatini. And then the last one.
Togo versus Eswatini is a 1 win, 0 tie, 1 loss.
Right, and that meeting was in the 2010 World Cup qualification, and Togo lost 2-1 in the away leg, but then came back to thrash Eswatini 6-0 at home. So I think we can probably conclude that Togo is stronger than Eswatini. All right, well, let's move on to a bit of a discussion about the teams, and we'll make some predictions about the games that have happened so far.
Yeah, so the rankings create a pretty clear delineation among the 4 teams in line with the pot numbers, and the chances of things turning out that way are high. Burkina Faso and Cape Verde are in good form and should at least form the top 2, whereas Togo and Eswatini, they're in weaker form and both have been inconsistent. They are capable of turning in a good performance, and both are strong at home, so are likely to take some points there.
Right, yeah, and we've seen that in rankings and in head-to-head, Burkina Faso looks a bit stronger than Cape Verde. They were actually even in the head-to-head until Burkina Faso won in the group stage of the 2021 African Cup. But even before that, Burkina Faso's 2 wins there in 2018 trumps the 2 wins that Cape Verde had in 2006. Um, Burkina Faso did lose actually in Togo in 1992, which really points out the danger that Togo pose at home. But we saw that they beat them in that 2013 African Cup quarterfinal, although it did require extra time. But Togo's quite a bit weaker since then, I think. And Cape Verde also exchanged home wins with Togo, but they met in 2004. So, yeah, all of Togo's successes seem to come in the past, and we've seen they're fairly weak. So, I'm not really holding out much hope for Togo, other than the fact that they can surprise, and Eswatini even more so. Um, they probably will get a couple of points at home, and the chances of surprising are not high, but it is there. So I'm going to go with my predictions. Am I ready to give my predictions, or do you
Yeah.
want to add?
No, let's hear them.
Okay, so I'm going to go Burkina Faso first, Cape Verde second, Togo third, Eswatini fourth, and I think it would be a surprise if it finished any other way, to be honest. Okay, now I'm excited about this next part because I actually don't know what has happened in the first few games, but you do. So we can actually kind of predict game by game here. So we have Togo facing Eswatini at home first, right?
Yeah, they played on June 3rd.
Okay, well, I'm gonna give Togo the nod there because they are at home, but both teams are very inconsistent. Especially Togo, I really can't rely on them. So I think there's an outside possibility of a chance, but to be honest, I think Eswatini are too weak. So I'm going to say 2-0 or maybe 2-1 for Togo.
Okay. Well, the actual result, that inconsistency maybe came into play a little bit for Togo because it was a 2-2 tie.
Ooh. Well, not a huge shock there, but a bit of a surprise. Mm-hmm. It would be kind of fun if Eswatini is competitive in this group. And Burkina Faso and Cape Verde is probably one of the most interesting games of the round. But Burkina Faso at home, I think will definitely. I think there's a really strong chance they'll win. I'm going to say 2-0 Burkina Faso.
You are absolutely right. 2-0.
Oh,
yeah.
Great. Good, because I'm kind of a fan of Burkina Faso, so I'm happy about that. All right, well, that's the end of the first round, and I guess the next games were played a little bit later. I don't have the dates there.
June 7th was the second set. So.
Okay, June 7th, and that had Eswatini at home to Burkina Faso, and again Eswatini a bit stronger at home, but I don't think they'll be strong enough to beat Burkina Faso. So I think it will be competitive, though. I'm going to say 2-1 Burkina Faso there.
You're right that Burkina Faso did pull off the win. It was actually 3-1.
Oh, okay.
So a little more convincing, but still fairly close.
Yeah, that is a consistent result because, especially in Africa, home form is really important. So we do kind of sometimes see these upsets. Cape Verde and Togo. This might be an interesting game if it was in Togo, but I think in Cape Verde, it's definitely going to be a Cape Verde win. I'm going to say 2-0 for Cape Verde.
That's exactly the way it went.
Oh,
2-0 win. Yeah.
Okay, well, I would call myself clever, but really what's happened here is just things went according to expectation, apart from the first game, Togo tying at home to Eswatini, a bit of a surprise. So can you maybe tell us what the table looks like as it stands?
Yeah, so not hugely surprising. Burkina Faso is on top with 6 points, winning both those first 2 games. And then Cape Verde being in second with 3 points. So 1 win and 1 loss there. And then tied with 1 point each is Eswatini and Togo. So
yeah, tied, but I would actually, even though mathematically they might be tied, I would say Eswatini has the advantage because they won away.
Yeah.
And that's huge in Africa. All right, well, that brings us to the end of the podcast. And thanks so much for joining me, Kiera. That was great.
Happy to be here.
Right. And I'll once again remind listeners that some of the things that we didn't talk about in this podcast is because they were covered in earlier podcasts in January, I think December or January. And we're going to put links in the show notes or the show description, and even tell you like when those things are being discussed, so that it'll be easy to access them. And you can find that information on our website. It is Soccer Files. That's soccer files, but with a PH, .captivate.fm. But maybe an easier way to find it is to type Soccer Files Canada into the Google, and I think we'll come up. So again, that's Soccer Files with a PH. And thanks for joining me, Kiera. Hopefully we'll see you for one or two a bit later on.
I hope so.
Okay, all the best.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye.